Everyone in the room froze. The soft clinking of crystal glasses, the distant sound of live classical music, the subtle conversations between billionaires, everything stopped the moment those cruel words were spoken. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated humiliation, delivered with the cold precision of someone who believed money could buy superiority. In that single moment, a decision was made, a decision that would cost them a $900 million deal. All because they dared to humiliate the wrong mother. Imagine being in that room. Imagine watching the wealthiest family in the city publicly insult your mother, as if she were invisible, as if her life meant nothing. Would you stay silent to protect your fortune? Or would you burn it all down to defend her honor? This is not just a story of revenge. This is the story of how one man, in a single sentence, destroyed everything they thought they controlled. Before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we uncover stories that reveal the true cost of power, stories where money isn't the greatest currency, integrity is. If you enjoy narratives that challenge injustice and expose the hidden consequences of arrogance, this is where you'll find them. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next turning point in this story, because what's about to happen will stay with you long after this video ends. Jonathan Thompson was no ordinary businessman. He was a legend among corporate giants, a self-made CEO who had transformed his small tech startup into one of the most valuable companies in the industry. His strategies were studied, his speeches echoed in universities, and his business instincts were admired even by his competitors. But what no one in that ballroom understood that night was the real source of his power. It wasn't the millions in his bank account. It wasn't the global influence he had built. It was his mother, Margaret Thompson. Margaret wasn't a woman accustomed to luxury or public attention. She had spent decades working invisible jobs, cleaning offices late into the night, stitching clothes in the early morning just to provide her son with a future. She didn't chase wealth. She chased survival. Every door that Jonathan had walked through, every opportunity he seized, was paved by her sacrifices. For Jonathan, no title, no contract, no corporate empire would ever be worth more than the woman who raised him. The invitation from the Carrington family arrived like a golden ticket. The Carringtons were more than billionaires, they were a dynasty. Owners of real estate empires, financial institutions, and international investments. Their name commanded respect, not because of who they were, but because of what they owned. A potential merger between Jonathan's company and the Carrington Group was estimated at over $900 million. It was the kind of deal that didn't just secure wealth, it solidified legacy. When Jonathan confirmed his attendance at the Carringtons' private gala, it was seen as a historic moment by both corporations. But what surprised his closest advisors was his decision to bring his mother with him. Some of them, although respectful, hesitated. They gently reminded him that such events were strategic, designed for networking with partners, investors, and shareholders. Margaret wouldn't understand the social games that ruled these circles. But Jonathan was unwavering. If I can't walk into that room with the person who built me, then I don't belong in that room. On the evening of the gala, the Carrington estate was lit like a palace. Rows of luxury cars lined the grand entrance, and guests moved through the marble halls with an air of practiced elegance. Men in tailored suits, women in shimmering designer dresses, all orbiting around the gravitational pull of wealth. When Jonathan arrived, stepping out of his car with his mother by his side, the crowd's attention subtly shifted. Some smiled politely, others exchanged brief glances. They had expected to see him arrive with a high-profile partner, perhaps another tech mogul or a celebrity philanthropist. But instead, he proudly escorted his mother, a quiet woman in a cream-colored dress and a simple decorative hat. Jonathan moved through the room with confidence, introducing his mother to some of the most influential people in the industry. Many greeted her with forced politeness, their smiles tight, their eyes already drifting back to the business matters they considered more important. Margaret, however, was perfectly content. She stayed near the edges of the room, observing, taking small sips of water, and watching her son shine. She wasn't there for the power plays or the signatures. She was there for him. It was later that evening when the moment that would change everything unfolded. Margaret had stepped away briefly, standing near one of the refreshment tables when Victoria Carrington, the family matriarch, approached. Victoria was the living embodiment of generational wealth, perfect posture, impeccable fashion, and the cold, instinctive ability to measure people's worth in an instant. Her gaze swept over Margaret's modest attire, lingering on her handbag and the subtle signs that she didn't come from their world. Without hesitation, and in a voice loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear, Victoria addressed her as though she were invisible. "Hey, you there. The drinks at our table are running low. Go and bring more. Quickly, please." The words didn't sound like a request. They sounded like a command from someone who had spent a lifetime believing that some people existed only to serve her. The surrounding guests paused. Some lowered their eyes, pretending not to hear. Others smirked behind their glasses. No one stepped forward. No one corrected her. Margaret's heart pounded, her throat tightening as she processed what had just happened. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wasn't part of the serving staff. She was a guest. She was his mother. And yet, to Victoria, none of that mattered. What she saw was a woman who, in her mind, didn't belong. Across the room, Jonathan watched the entire exchange. His conversation with a group of investors immediately faded into silence in his mind. His vision narrowed to a single focus: his mother's face, the weight of humiliation pressing on her shoulders, the cruel arrogance in Victoria's voice. Jonathan's steps were deliberate, steady, his expression unreadable as he crossed the ballroom. He approached his mother calmly, placing a firm but comforting hand on her shoulder. "Mother, we're leaving," he said, his voice low but resolute. Victoria, amused and unaware of the storm she had just awakened, let out a soft laugh. "Oh, Jonathan, you don't need to be so sensitive. It was just a simple misunderstanding." Jonathan looked her directly in the eyes, his voice sharpening like a blade. "The misunderstanding is believing that your money gives you the right to humiliate people. Especially my mother." Victoria's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Surely you're not going to let this trivial moment jeopardize our agreement." Without breaking eye contact, Jonathan turned to his assistant, who had been standing quietly nearby. "Call the office," he said, his tone unwavering. "Cancel the entire deal. Effective immediately." His assistant hesitated for just a second, stunned by the weight of the command. "Yes, sir," he finally replied, pulling out his phone as the silence in the room deepened. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she was still clinging to the belief that this was just posturing. "Jonathan, this is a $900 million partnership. You'll regret this." Jonathan's gaze didn't flicker. "I would regret staying." Without another word, he gently guided his mother toward the exit. The Carringtons stood frozen, and the room remained breathless as they walked away, heads held high. What neither the Carringtons nor their esteemed guests realized at that moment was that this wasn't just the end of a deal. It was the beginning of their downfall. Stay with me, because what happens next will show how a single act of disrespect can cost a fortune, and much, much more. As Jonathan and his mother stepped into the quiet night outside the Carrington estate, the cold air seemed almost comforting compared to the suffocating arrogance they had just left behind. The valet quickly brought their car, but for a moment, neither of them moved. Margaret, still processing the humiliation, finally broke the silence. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, her voice filled with concern rather than regret. "That deal meant everything for your company." Jonathan turned to her, his expression calm, but his words unshakable. "No, Mother. That deal meant nothing the moment they disrespected you. They think they can buy anything, but they can't buy us. They can't buy you." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. His certainty was louder than anger. What neither of them realized at that moment was that the decision made in those few seconds would not just affect the Carrington family, it would send shockwaves across the entire business world. By the next morning, news had begun to circulate quietly among elite investors and corporate insiders. The sudden collapse of a $900 million merger was not something that could go unnoticed. The official story, carefully released by Jonathan's team, was simple: irreconcilable ethical differences. But that phrase sparked curiosity and speculation. Journalists wanted more. Investors wanted answers. And employees at the gala, who had witnessed the public insult, began sharing the details privately. Within days, the truth began to leak. Whispers about the Carringtons' behavior spread through boardrooms, industry events, and private online forums. Executives who had once admired the Carrington family now questioned their values. Influential partners began to distance themselves. Financial analysts quietly adjusted their long-term risk assessments of Carrington Group investments. Reputation, in their world, was currency. And it was bleeding. The Carrington family, especially Victoria, was not used to losing. She launched an aggressive damage control campaign. Press releases were drafted with surgical precision, public relations teams scrambled to reshape the narrative, and Victoria herself offered carefully crafted apologies, calling the incident an unfortunate misunderstanding, hoping the language would neutralize the growing backlash. But none of it worked. The story was alive. And worse, it was gaining sympathy for Jonathan. Unlike the Carringtons, Jonathan remained silent. He gave no interviews. He refused to engage with the media storm. His silence only made the story more powerful. People projected their own values onto his decision. Some called him a man of integrity. Others saw him as a ruthless strategist who punished arrogance with surgical precision. But the truth was simple: Jonathan never sought revenge. He simply enforced his principles. Meanwhile, the Carrington family's situation grew increasingly unstable. Partners began withdrawing from joint ventures. Investment banks quietly closed doors that had always been open. Even loyal allies hesitated to be publicly associated with them. In the world of high finance, perception is reality. And the perception now was that the Carringtons were toxic. Victoria, desperate to salvage what she could, made several attempts to contact Jonathan. Her calls went unanswered. Letters, emails, and even personal messengers sent by mutual contacts were ignored. For weeks, she strategized behind closed doors, determined to find a way to pull him back into the deal. Finally, she requested a private meeting: no advisors, no lawyers, no assistants. Just her and Jonathan. She wanted one last chance to convince him to return. Out of curiosity, or perhaps to bring final closure, Jonathan agreed. The meeting was held in a discreet, neutral office, far from public view. When Jonathan entered the room, Victoria was already seated. The woman who had once radiated untouchable superiority now carried the weight of visible exhaustion. Her carefully managed posture faltered slightly, and her smile, though still present, lacked its former sharpness. "Jonathan," she began, her tone softer than he had ever heard. "I wanted to meet you without intermediaries. Without lawyers. Just us." Jonathan remained standing, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I've reflected a lot on what happened," she continued. "What I said that night, it was unacceptable. I allowed my arrogance to cloud my judgment. I realize now that I misjudged your mother, and I misjudged you." Jonathan said nothing. "We want to make this right," she pressed. "The original deal is still on the table. In fact, we're prepared to improve the terms. You'll have full operational control. We'll issue a public apology. I will personally apologize to your mother." Her offer was generous, more generous than the original contract. But Jonathan could see through it. The words were carefully selected. The apology, like the new terms, was a strategy, not remorse. After a long silence, Jonathan finally spoke. "Do you know why I left that night?" "Because I insulted your mother," she answered quickly. "No," he said firmly. "Because you showed me exactly who you are. Money changes contracts. It changes numbers. It changes public perception. But it doesn't change character." Victoria's voice trembled slightly. "Jonathan, think carefully. This partnership is crucial to both our companies." He shook his head. "Not to mine. I've built my company from nothing. I've built it without you. And I will continue without you." Victoria's mask cracked. For the first time, her desperation bled through. "Don't throw away this opportunity over a moment of pride." Jonathan's response was cold and final. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm protecting what's worth more than money. I protect my mother. I protect my name. I protect the legacy she helped me build." He turned toward the door. "Some things," he added without looking back, "cannot be bought." Victoria sat motionless, the weight of those words sinking into the silence. Jonathan walked out, not as a man who had lost a deal, but as one who had reclaimed something far more valuable. When he returned to his office, his assistant approached carefully. "Sir, several new partners have reached out. They admire your decision. They're asking to open negotiations." Jonathan nodded. "Only with people who understand why I walked away." His company didn't just survive without the Carringtons. It grew. It thrived. It attracted partners who respected the power of principle over profit. And Jonathan never once used the story to elevate his image. He let the truth speak for itself. Meanwhile, the Carrington family continued to suffer the slow erosion of their influence. Their reputation, once untouchable, remained permanently scarred. Victoria tried to recover, but the industry never fully forgot the story of the deal that collapsed because they underestimated the value of one woman's dignity. And Margaret? She lived quietly, still attending community events, still wearing her simple dresses, still holding on to the quiet strength that had raised a man willing to walk away from millions to defend her. She never asked for an apology. She never needed one. She knew who she was. Sometimes, the greatest victories are not measured in contracts signed or fortunes secured. Sometimes, they are measured in the moments when we choose to stand for those we love, no matter the cost. If this story touched you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we bring you powerful, untold stories that reveal the true price of pride, the weight of integrity, and the moments that define our character. Like this video if you believe that some values are simply not for sale, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Jonathan's place? Your story might inspire someone else to find the courage to walk away when it matters most.